In this video, I'm going to be assembling my Harbor Freight bandsaw. I unboxed the saw and did a bit of inspecting as well in my last video. Everything seemed fine to me, so let's begin. I start by loosening the jam nut on the belt tensioning bolt and then backing it out a few turns. Using the supplied hex wrench, I loosen the pulleys on the gearbox and the motor and then remove them. The two screws with washers located underneath the gearbox pulley need to be removed. Can't lose this key. This screw located on the motor pivot needs to be removed. Pivoting the motor allows me to install the belt cover. After aligning the holes, the screws are reinstalled. They need to be left loose until after the cover is adjusted. The motor shaft needs to remain centered in its respective slot as it pivots. Then the three screws can be tightened down. In preparation for the pulley, the key is reinstalled in the motor shaft. Next, I install that pulley. The gearbox pulley is a little different. Do you see this set screw here? It needs to align with this flat spot on the gearbox shaft. I go ahead and tighten the set screw in the motor pulley. Using a straight edge, I attempt to align the face of the gearbox pulley with the face of the motor pulley. But the pulleys don't align, so I loosen the 4 motor mount bolts and adjust it as much as I can. But the pulleys still don't line up. Looks like the motor mounting plate needs a little modification. It should be close enough to get me by in the meantime, though. See here how the motor pulley doesn't line up? I retightened all 4 motor mount bolts, and then the set screw for the gearbox pulley was tightened, and then installed the belt on the lowest speed setting. With a 14mm wrench, I tighten the belt tensioning bolt to give a belt deflection of approximately ½ an inch with moderate finger pressure. This nut locks the belt tensioning bolt. At this point, I think I'm going to plug it in and turn it on to see how it sounds. The saw sounds okay, but the blade tracking needs adjustment, which I'll do in a later video. Now the belt is moved to the high-speed setting. And tensioned as shown previously. This time, after plugging the saw in and turning it on, it makes quite a bit more noise. The back edge of the blade is rubbing pretty hard against the guides on its pulleys, but I'll deal with it later. For now, I unplug it once again and close the belt cover. Here are the fasteners that attach the shelf to the stand. With assistance from a clamp, the fasteners are installed. After loosely installing the bolts, I pull the shelf towards what will be the top of the stand, and then tighten the bolts using a 10mm wrench and a Phillips head screwdriver. With the shelf fastened to this side of the stand, I can now prop up the shelf using part of the packaging and a 2x4, and then attach the other side of the stand. The fasteners on this side are installed the same as the other side. Here are the fasteners that secure the handle, the wheels, and the feet. The handle is secured using 2 cotter pins. One of the legs on each of the cotter pins is bent to prevent them from backing out. The axle bracket and 2 of the feet share fasteners, so they need to be installed at the same time. I installed a flat washer on each bolt before inserting them through the axle bracket, and another flat washer on the back side of each joint, followed by the split washer and then a nut. The wheels go on before tightening those bolts. With this 10mm socket and 10mm wrench, I'm going to tighten down the axle bracket bolts. The wheels get locked into place using the remaining 2 cotter pins. A quick bend and they're both secure. Next is the installation of all 4 feet and then tightening down their respective fasteners. At this point, I set the stand on the floor and mount the main saw body onto it. Here are the fasteners required to unify the stand with the main saw body. The bolts are installed from the outside and their respective flat washers and nuts are toward the inside. The bolts are tightened with a 14mm socket and a 14mm wrench. This adjustable stop jig should come in handy for some really short cuts. After installing, I set the jig up to cut some short test pieces. Using this 17mm wrench, I loosened the blade guide support so the blade guide bearings can be brought as close to the material being cut as possible. The guide bearings shouldn't contact the table at any time. I actually forgot to make this adjustment until after my first couple of cuts. The other guide bearing support has a locking knob which can be installed in two separate positions, which gives it a wider range of movement. The miter block is set to 0 for a square cut, and the two clamping bolts are clamped in place using a 14mm socket and a 14mm wrench. Okay, now let's see how well it cuts. After clamping some mild steel tubing in the vise, I plug it in and turn it on. The fine rust particles that come off the material look like smoke. Cuts pretty good, but now I'd like to check the accuracy. The material is rotated 180 degrees before the next cut. I'll speed the video up this time. Not bad, but as I hold the piece in the orientation in which it was last cut, we can see that the bottom of the piece is narrower than the top, which indicates the saw blade is wandering out away from the saw body as it cuts. But the cut lines on the top and bottom of the piece are parallel, so that tells me that the saw miter is fairly accurate. The square confirms what the test piece indicated. It's not too bad for just out of the box, but I'm definitely going to need to adjust it. If this was 3-inch tubing, it would be much more noticeable. It's good to see the miter gauge is close, if not spot on. Now let's test the saw in the vertical configuration. After loosening the lower guide bearing support and locking the saw arm in the raised position, this blade guard is removed. With the blade guard removed, we can now install the table for the vertical bandsaw. The table may or may not be square with the blade, but it can be adjusted a little bit with this next piece. The open slot on the end of this brace is secured with the same bolt as the blade guide support. And the other end of the support bolts to the table. The fasteners on top are tightened first. This lower bolt is tightened after checking the table for square against the blade. The upper blade guide support can now be adjusted according to the thickness of the material to be cut. And now let's test it with this piece of aluminum. My technique could use improvement, but the saw worked fine. Well, so far it looks like a good little saw. It needs a few adjustments, but I'll get to those in my next video. Thank you for watching.